The notification sound from my phone cut through the silence of my apartment like a knife. 3 words on the screen that would change everything. We need space. But this wasn't just another breakup text. This was the beginning of a story about what happens when someone thinks the grass is greener on the other side, only to discover they were standing in a field of weeds. By the time she realized her mistake, I was already gone. This is what happened when Sarah Mitchell decided she wanted better, and why I told her she'd get worse, but not with me. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from and if this story touches you. Make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah and I had been together for 3 years. 3 years of what I thought was building something real in downtown Portland. We met at a coffee shop on Morrison Street. One of those places where baristas know your order before you reach the counter. She was reading Murakami. I was working on my laptop, and somehow a conversation about terrible Wi-Fi turned into dinner plans. Back then, Sarah worked as a marketing coordinator for a small tech startup. Nothing glamorous, but she was passionate about it. She'd come home excited about campaigns she'd designed, metrics she'd improved, small wins that felt massive to her. I was finishing my master's in software engineering while working part-time at a local repair shop. We weren't wealthy, but we were happy, or so I believed. Our apartment was a cramped 1-bedroom in the Pearl District that cost way too much for what it was, but we made it work. Sunday mornings meant pancakes and crossword puzzles. Tuesday nights were our standing date for trying new restaurants, even if new usually meant a different food truck. Sarah had this laugh that started quiet and built into something that filled the entire room. When she was genuinely happy, her whole face would light up, and she'd scrunch her nose in this way that made me fall in love with her all over again. The first crack appeared around month 32. Sarah's college roommate, Jessica Chen, moved back to Portland after landing some high-paying job in finance. Suddenly, our Tuesday food truck dates weren't interesting enough. Jessica lived in a penthouse downtown, drove a BMW, and seemed to have an endless budget for experiences that made our life look ordinary by comparison. "Look at this," Sarah would say, scrolling through Jessica's Instagram stories. Photos from expensive restaurants, weekend trips to wine country, designer clothes that cost more than our monthly rent. She's really living, you know. I should have seen it then. The way Sarah's eyes lingered on those posts, the way she started comparing everything we did to what Jessica was doing. But I was focused on my thesis, on our future, on what I thought we were building together. Things escalated when Jessica started inviting Sarah to events I couldn't afford. Gallery openings where champagne cost $20 a glass. Charity galas with $100 tickets. Sarah would ask if I wanted to come, already knowing the answer. When I'd suggest alternatives, a movie night, a hike, something within our budget, she'd agree, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. The conversation started changing. Instead of talking about her work, Sarah began mentioning other people's successes. How Jessica's boyfriend had just bought a Tesla. How her cousin in Seattle was planning a European vacation. How everyone seemed to be moving forward while we were standing still. "Don't you want more?" she asked one evening. We were eating takeout Chinese food on our couch, watching Netflix on my laptop because we didn't own a decent TV. "More what?" I asked, though I already knew where this was heading. "More everything. A better place to live, better experiences, a better life." I set down my chopsticks and looked at her. "What we have isn't good enough." She backtracked quickly. "That's not what I meant. I just think we could do better. We're both smart, we're both capable. Why are we settling for mediocre?" Mediocre. That word stuck with me for days. Was our life mediocre? Were the small moments we shared, morning coffee conversations, late night talks about everything and nothing, the way she'd steal my hoodies and claim they were more comfortable, were those things worthless because they didn't come with a price tag? The final month was torture. Sarah became increasingly distant, always on her phone, always making plans that somehow didn't include me. She started working late more often, though I suspected those late nights involved drinks with Jessica and her circle of successful friends. Our conversations became surface-level exchanges about schedules and responsibilities. She stopped laughing at my jokes. She stopped stealing my hoodies. She stopped looking at me like I was someone she chose to be with and started looking at me like I was someone she was stuck with. The breaking point came on a Thursday night in February. Sarah walked in around 10 p.m., designer shopping bags in her hands. Bags I knew she couldn't afford on her salary. "Where have you been?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Shopping with Jessica." She helped me pick out some new clothes for work. "With what money?" Sarah's jaw tightened. "I opened a credit card. We talked about money constantly. We had a budget. We had goals. Opening a credit card without discussion was a violation of everything we'd agreed on. Sarah, we can't afford designer clothes right now. We're trying to save for what?" She interrupted. "For some imaginary future where we might be able to afford a decent apartment, where we might be able to go somewhere nice for vacation. I'm tired of waiting for someday. So you decided to go into debt instead. I decided to invest in myself, to look the part of someone who deserves better." There it was again, better, as if everything we had was somehow beneath her. "And what exactly do you think you deserve, Sarah?" She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Not anger, not frustration, but something colder, calculation. "I deserve someone who wants to build a real life, not someone who's content with scraping by." The words hit harder than I expected. 3 years of building something together, and she saw it as scraping by. "Is that really what you think? That I don't want to build a life with you? I think you're comfortable with ordinary, and I'm not anymore." That night, she slept on the couch. The next morning, she was gone before I woke up, and there was a note on the kitchen counter. Not even the courtesy of a face-to-face conversation. The note was short. "I need to figure out what I want. I think we both know this isn't working anymore. I'll be staying with Jessica for a while. We need some space to think." Space, the most devastating word in the relationship dictionary, disguised as something reasonable and mature. But the real conversation, the one that would define everything that came next, was still 3 weeks away. Because Sarah Mitchell thought she wanted better, and she was about to discover just how wrong she could be. 3 weeks of silence. 21 days of wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life by not fighting harder for us. During those weeks, I threw myself into finishing my thesis and picked up extra hours at the repair shop. My friends, Mark, David, and Tyler, tried to drag me out to bars, but I wasn't ready for their well-meaning advice about fish in the sea. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday night, around 11 p.m., when my phone buzzed with Sarah's name. For a split second, my heart jumped. Maybe she'd realized what we'd thrown away. Maybe she missed our Tuesday food truck traditions and Sunday crossword puzzles. "Hello." "Hey." Her voice was different, smaller somehow. Can we talk? I thought you needed space." "I did. I do. It's complicated." A long pause. "Can I come over? I know it's late, but I really need to talk to someone who knows me. Someone who knows me. Not someone who loves me, not someone she missed. Someone who knows her." But I agreed anyway. She arrived 20 minutes later, and the change was immediate. The confident woman who'd walked out with designer shopping bags was gone. Sarah looked exhausted, her hair pulled back messily, wearing an old Northwestern University sweatshirt I recognized from our early dating days. "Coffee?" I offered, falling back into old patterns. She nodded and sat at our small kitchen table while I prepared 2 cups. The familiarity of the routine felt both comforting and painful. "How's Jessica's place?" I asked, setting her mug down. Sarah's face tightened. "That's actually why I'm here." She wrapped her hands around the mug, like she was trying to absorb its warmth. "Living with Jessica has been enlightening." I waited. One thing I'd learned about Sarah over 3 years was that she needed time to organize her thoughts before diving into difficult conversations. "Do you remember how perfect her life seemed from the outside?" she continued. The Instagram posts, the expensive dinners, the penthouse. I remember you being pretty impressed by it all. I was. I was so impressed that I didn't ask the right questions. Sarah took a sip of coffee and grimaced. God, I missed your coffee. Jessica has this fancy espresso machine that makes everything taste burnt. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She was deflecting, but I let her. Turns out Jessica's life isn't what it appears to be. That penthouse? She's splitting it with 3 roommates, but she only posts photos of the common areas. The BMW leased, and she's behind on payments. Those expensive restaurants. She takes photos of food she orders, eats 2 bites for Instagram, then fills up on whatever's cheapest on the menu. I felt a strange mix of vindication and sadness. So the perfect life was an illusion? Worse than that, it's a house of cards built on credit card debt and desperate networking. Sarah's hands were shaking slightly as she lifted her mug again. Do you know what she said to me on my first night there? She said I needed to up my social media game if I wanted to attract the right kind of guy. She literally coached me on how to make my life look more appealing online than it actually is. The pieces were starting to come together. Is that why you wanted to break up? To upgrade? Sarah's cheeks flushed red. She convinced me that you were holding me back, that I was settling for someone who didn't match my ambition. She had this whole theory about how successful women need to date up or they'll drag themselves down to their partner's level. And you believed her? I wanted to believe her. I was so caught up in the idea that everyone else was living these amazing lives while we were just existing. She paused. Jessica introduced me to her boyfriend, Richard. Investment banker, drives a Porsche, takes her on weekend trips to Napa Valley. Sounds perfect. I thought so too, until I spent 3 weeks watching their actual relationship. Sarah's voice got quieter. He treats her like an accessory. Shows up when it's convenient, cancels plans constantly, openly flirts with other women in front of her. Last weekend, she spent 2 hours getting ready for a dinner reservation he made, only to have him text 30 minutes before to cancel because something better came up. And she puts up with that. She does more than put up with it. She makes excuses for him. He's just busy, or successful men have demands on their time. But I watched her cry in the bathroom after he cancelled, then watched her post a selfie with the caption, "Self-Care Saturday," to make it look like she'd chosen to stay in. The coffee had gone cold between us, but neither of us moved to refresh it. The worst part, Sarah continued, was watching Jessica scramble to maintain this image. She works 60-hour weeks at a job she hates, spending money she doesn't have on clothes she wears once for photos, dating a man who doesn't respect her, all because she's terrified of looking ordinary. And that's what you thought you wanted. Sarah looked directly at me for the first time since she'd arrived. I didn't know what I wanted. I just knew I felt restless and unsatisfied, and Jessica made it seem like the problem was external. Like if I just changed my circumstances, I'd feel different. Do you feel different? I feel empty. The admission seemed to surprise her. Living in that apartment, surrounded by expensive things that don't belong to me, watching people perform happiness instead of actually experiencing it. It's exhausting. I leaned back in my chair, processing everything she'd told me. Part of me wanted to say, "I told you so," but a larger part just felt sad for her. "There's something else," Sarah said, and her voice got even smaller. "Jessica's been trying to set me up with men from her circle. Guys like Richard. Last Thursday she arranged a double date." My stomach tightened. "How did that go?" His name was Bradley Hoffman. 34, works in real estate, drives a Tesla. She said it like she was reciting a resume. He spent the entire dinner talking about his closing rates and his workout routine. Asked me 3 questions about myself, didn't listen to any of my answers, and assumed we'd go back to his place afterward. "Did you?" I made an excuse and left. But sitting across from him, listening to him talk about quarterly projections like they were the meaning of life, all I could think about was how you used to ask me about my work because you genuinely cared about what I was doing. How you remembered the names of my co-workers and followed up on projects I was excited about. The compliment felt bittersweet. Sarah, why are you telling me this? She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her empty coffee mug. Because I think I made the biggest mistake of my life. Because I threw away something real for something that doesn't even exist. Because I hurt the one person who actually saw me and loved me anyway. The words hung in the air between us. 3 weeks ago, hearing this might have fixed everything. But now, after the initial pain had settled into acceptance, after I'd started imagining a life without her, it felt more complicated. And what do you want me to do with that information? I asked. I want to come home, she said quietly. I want to fix this. I want us to try again. I looked at Sarah sitting in our kitchen, wearing my old sweatshirt, looking vulnerable and regretful, and realized something had fundamentally changed. Not just in her, but in me. Sarah, I said gently, you said you wanted better. I told you that you'd get worse, but not with me. I meant that. Her face fell. What does that mean? It means the person you were looking for doesn't exist. And the person you left isn't waiting for you anymore. Sarah stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. What do you mean the person I left isn't waiting anymore? It's only been 3 weeks. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Portland skyline. The city lights twinkled in the distance, each one representing someone's life, someone's choices, someone's consequences. 3 weeks can change everything. Sarah, especially when those 3 weeks come after months of feeling like I wasn't enough for the person I loved. You were enough. You are enough. I was just confused. No, I turned back to face her. You weren't confused. You were clear about exactly what you wanted. Someone better than me, a better life than this. You made a calculated decision based on what you thought would make you happier. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. And I was wrong. Completely, devastatingly wrong. Being wrong doesn't undo the choice. Sarah, it doesn't erase the fact that when Jessica showed you a different option, you didn't even hesitate to throw away what we had. She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of the sweatshirt. That's not true. I hesitated. I agonized over it. You agonized over logistics. Not over whether you wanted to leave me, but over how to do it with minimum confrontation. That note you left? That wasn't agonizing over our relationship. That was avoiding accountability for ending it. The words came out harsher than I intended, but they needed to be said. For 3 weeks, I'd replayed our last conversations, looking for signs I'd missed, wondering if I could have done something differently. But the truth was simpler and more painful. She'd made her choice with full awareness of what she was giving up. So that's it? Sarah asked. 3 years together, and you won't even consider giving us another chance? I sat back down across from her. Tell me something, Sarah. In those 3 weeks at Jessica's place, surrounded by the life you thought you wanted, how many times did you think about me? She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. I was trying to figure myself out. That's not what I asked. How many times did you miss me? Miss us, miss this. I gestured around our small kitchen with its mismatched chairs and the coffee stain on the table from where she'd spilled her drink 2 months ago. I was trying not to think about what I'd left behind. Exactly. You were trying not to think about me because thinking about me would have interfered with your experiment in upgrading your life. I leaned forward. Sarah, you didn't come back because you realized I was the love of your life. You came back because your backup plan didn't work out. Her face crumpled. That's not fair, isn't it? If Jessica's life had been everything it appeared to be, if Bradley Hoffman had been charming and interesting, if that world had welcomed you with open arms, would you be sitting in this kitchen right now? She couldn't answer, which was an answer in itself. Here's what really happened, I continued. You met someone who convinced you that you deserved better than what we had. Instead of talking to me about feeling restless or wanting more from life, you decided I was the problem. You looked at our relationship and saw it as something holding you back instead of something we could build forward together. I know I handled it badly. You handled it exactly the way someone handles it when they've already mentally checked out. The Sarah I fell in love with would have talked to me, would have said she was feeling unsatisfied and wanted us to dream bigger together. The Sarah who left that note had already decided I wasn't worth the conversation. Sarah was crying openly now, but I felt strangely calm. The anger I'd carried for 3 weeks was gone, replaced by a clarity I hadn't expected. During those 3 weeks, I said, while you were discovering that Jessica's life was an illusion, I was discovering something too. I was remembering who I was before I spent months walking on eggshells, trying to be enough for someone who'd already decided I wasn't. What do you mean? I mean I stopped apologizing for our life. I stopped feeling guilty for not being able to afford the restaurants Jessica frequented or the clothes she wore. I remembered that I actually liked our Tuesday food truck dates and our Sunday crossword puzzles. I remembered that before you started comparing everything to Jessica's Instagram, we were happy. Sarah reached across the table toward my hand. But I pulled it back. The night before you left, I continued, you said I was comfortable with ordinary. But what you called ordinary, I called building something real. What you saw as settling, I saw as choosing substance over surface. I see that now, but you didn't see it then when it mattered. And that's the problem, Sarah. Your feelings about our relationship were conditional on external validation. The moment someone showed you what you thought was a better option, everything we'd built became expendable. She was sobbing now. The kind of crying that comes from realizing you've lost something irreplaceable through your own choices. Please, she whispered. Please don't let my mistake destroy everything we had. I felt a stab of pain watching her break down, but I also felt something else. Relief. Relief that I was finally saying the things I should have said months ago, instead of trying to be understanding and accommodating. Sarah, what we had was already destroyed. Not by your leaving, but by the months before you left, when you stopped seeing value in what we were building together. When you started measuring our relationship against other people's highlight reels. I stood up and walked to the sink, rinsing out our coffee mugs, a domestic routine that felt both familiar and final. The person you fell in love with, I said without turning around, deserved better than someone who saw him as a placeholder until something superior came along. And the person you became deserves to figure out who she actually is, instead of bouncing between other people's definitions of success. So you're giving up on us? I turned around and looked at her one final time. Sarah Mitchell, sitting in our kitchen wearing my old sweatshirt, looking broken and lost and sorry. 3 weeks ago, this scene would have felt like redemption. Now it just felt like the end of a story that had already concluded. I'm not giving up on us, Sarah. There is no us anymore. There's you, trying to undo a decision you regret. And there's me, finally understanding that I deserve someone who chooses me, even when better options appear to be available. She stood up slowly, like someone much older than her 26 years. Where do we go from here? She asked. You go back to Jessica's and figure out who you want to be when you're not trying to impress anyone. You take time to understand why you were willing to throw away something real for something that turned out to be fake. And maybe eventually you find someone who wants to build the life you actually want, not the life you think looks good from the outside. And you? I smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. I go back to being someone who knows his worth. Someone who doesn't apologize for wanting genuine connection over impressive circumstances. Someone who learned that when a person shows you who they are, you should believe them the first time. Sarah walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. For what it's worth, she said, you were right. I did get worse. But you're also right that it won't be with you. I know, I replied. And that's exactly why it had to end this way. After she left, I sat in the quiet apartment and realized something profound. I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I was free. 6 months later, I was sitting in a different coffee shop, one on Hawthorne Boulevard that Sarah and I had never been to together. I'd made it a rule to avoid places that held too many memories, at least until they stopped feeling like shrines to something that no longer existed. My laptop was open, showing the final draft of my thesis. And my phone buzzed with a text from my advisor, confirming my defense date. Life had a way of moving forward, whether you felt ready or not. Tyler dropped into the chair across from me, carrying 2 cups of coffee, and wearing the expression of someone about to deliver news he wasn't sure I wanted to hear. "Okay. Don't shoot the messenger," he said, sliding 1 cup toward me. "But I saw Sarah yesterday." I looked up from my screen, and she was at Pioneer Square with some guy. Tall, kind of preppy-looking, driving a decent car. They looked together. I felt a small tug of something, not jealousy exactly, but a kind of curiosity about whether she'd learned anything from our implosion. "Good for her," I said, and meant it. Tyler studied my face. "You're really okay with that?" "Tyler, it's been 6 months. Of course I'm okay with it." I saved my document and closed the laptop. "Actually, I'm more than okay with it. I'm relieved." Relieved that she's not still hung up on fixing something that couldn't be fixed. Relieved that she's moving forward instead of backward. Relieved that I don't have to worry about her showing up at my door again with another apology I can't accept. That was true. But it wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth was more complicated. 2 weeks after our final conversation, Sarah had tried calling again. Then she'd sent a series of texts that gradually shifted from apologetic to angry to resigned. The last one, sent at 2 a.m. on a Thursday, simply said, "I hope you find someone who appreciates what I threw away." I never responded, and she never reached out again, but I knew from mutual friends that her life had taken several more turns. She'd moved out of Jessica's place after a blowout fight. Something about Jessica bringing Richard to a dinner party where he'd spent the evening hitting on every woman present, including Sarah. She'd found her own studio apartment in Selwood, modest but hers. She'd started therapy, according to Mark, who'd run into her at a bookstore and reported back, despite my protests, that I didn't need updates. Most importantly, she'd quit her job at the startup and taken a position with a non-profit focused on environmental conservation. Less money, but apparently more fulfillment. The old Sarah might have seen it as a step backward. The new Sarah, it seemed, was learning to define success differently. "Have you been dating anyone?" Tyler asked, interrupting my thoughts. I smiled. "Actually, yes." His eyebrows shot up. "And you didn't tell us?" "Who is she?" "Her name is Amanda Rodriguez. She's a veterinarian at the clinic on Division Street." "How did you meet?" "My neighbor's cat got sick, and I offered to drive Mrs. Chen to the vet since she doesn't have a car." Amanda was the doctor who treated Whiskers, and we ended up talking for 20 minutes about everything except cats. Tyler grinned. And she's nothing like Sarah. Not in a reactionary way, just genuinely different. She's practical without being cynical. She's ambitious without being status-conscious. She chose veterinary medicine because she loves animals, not because it would impress anyone. She drives a 10-year-old Honda Civic and is proud of the fact that she paid it off early. Sounds like the anti-Sarah. "That's not fair to either of them," I said. "Sarah wasn't a bad person. She was just a person who got lost in other people's definitions of what her life should look like. Amanda is someone who's always been clear about her own values." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the pedestrian traffic on Hawthorne. Portland in October was beautiful. The leaves changing colors, the air crisp but not cold, people still sitting outside cafes under heat lamps. "Can I ask you something?" Tyler said. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Sarah hadn't gotten caught up in Jessica's world? If she'd just talked to you about feeling restless instead of deciding you were the problem?" I'd thought about this more than I cared to admit. Honestly, I think we would have broken up eventually anyway, really. The Jessica situation didn't create the problems in our relationship. It just exposed them. Sarah was looking for external validation, and I was trying to be enough for someone who didn't know what enough looked like. That's not sustainable regardless of whether Jessica was in the picture. Tyler nodded slowly. "So you think it was always doomed?" "I think it was doomed once we stopped growing in the same direction. Sarah wanted to become someone else, and I wanted us to become more of who we already were. Those are incompatible goals. My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. Emergency surgery running late. Rain check on dinner? I'll make it up to you with homemade tacos tomorrow. I smiled and texted back, save lives. Tacos can wait. That's her? Tyler asked, noticing my expression. That's her. You look different when you talk about her. Different how? Lighter. Like you're not carrying around the weight of proving yourself worthy of someone's attention. He was more perceptive than I gave him credit for. That's exactly what it feels like. With Sarah, especially toward the end, I felt like I was auditioning for the role of boyfriend every day. With Amanda, I just get to be myself. And she's okay with your ordinary life? Tyler teased, referencing Sarah's old complaint. She doesn't think my life is ordinary. She thinks it's real. And she wants to build something real with me, instead of performing happiness for other people's consumption. We finished our coffee and walked outside. The late afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the street, and I realized I felt genuinely content for the first time in months. One more question, Tyler said as we reached his car. If Sarah called right now and said she'd figured everything out, that she'd learned from her mistakes and wanted to try again, what would you say? I considered this seriously. I'd say I hope she has figured it out, because that would be good for her and good for whoever she ends up with. But it wouldn't change anything between us. Why not? Because forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. I forgave Sarah for what she put us both through. But forgiving someone doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen or that it didn't change you. I'm not the same person who would accept being someone's backup plan. Tyler got into his car and rolled down the window. You know what I think? What? I think Sarah did you a favor. Not intentionally, but she forced you to figure out who you are when you're not trying to save a relationship with someone who doesn't want to be saved. As he drove away, I walked the 10 blocks back to my apartment, the same apartment Sarah and I had shared, but redecorated and reorganized until it felt like mine instead of ours. The photos were different, the furniture rearranged, the walls painted a color I'd chosen without consulting anyone else's preferences. That evening, I called Amanda and we talked for 2 hours about her emergency surgery, my thesis defense preparation, and our plans for the weekend. The conversation flowed naturally, without the careful navigation required to avoid triggering insecurities or comparisons to other people's lives. Before hanging up, she said something that would have been impossible in my relationship with Sarah. I'm proud of you for defending your thesis next month. I know how hard you've worked for this. Pride, not comparison to what other people had accomplished. Not suggestions for how I could leverage this achievement into something more impressive. Just genuine pride in my accomplishment. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee, properly brewed, the way I liked it, and thought about the strange journey that had brought me to this point. Sarah's departure had felt like the end of the world, but it had actually been the beginning of a much better one. She'd wanted better, and in pursuing it, she'd forced me to understand what better actually meant. Not more impressive circumstances or higher status relationships, but genuine connection with someone who saw value in building something real together. The irony wasn't lost on me. By leaving me for something better, Sarah had inadvertently led me to something better too. Just not with her, exactly as I'd told her it would be. 1 year and 3 months after Sarah walked out of our shared apartment, I found myself standing in the lobby of the Hilton downtown, adjusting my tie and checking my phone for the 5th time. The occasion was Mark's wedding reception, and despite my initial reluctance to attend, knowing Sarah would likely be there, Amanda had convinced me it was time to stop avoiding social situations based on my ex's potential presence. You look nervous, Amanda said, sliding her arm through mine. She wore a navy blue dress that complemented her olive skin and had spent the morning assuring me that meeting my college friends wouldn't be an interrogation. Not nervous exactly, just aware that tonight might get complicated because of Sarah. Because of the inevitable questions about Sarah. Mark's friends love drama, and our breakup was pretty spectacular from their perspective. Amanda squeezed my arm. Let them ask. You have nothing to hide and nothing to be ashamed of. She was right, of course. The past 15 months had taught me the difference between privacy and secrecy. I wasn't ashamed of my relationship with Sarah or how it ended. I'd simply moved beyond needing to rehash it for other people's entertainment. We made our way into the reception hall, and I immediately spotted familiar faces from college. David waved us over to a table where Tyler was already holding court with some story about his latest dating disaster. The atmosphere was warm and celebratory, exactly what Mark deserved after 5 years with Emma. There he is, Tyler announced as we approached. The mystery man who's been hiding his girlfriend from us for months. Amanda Rodriguez, she said, extending her hand to the table with easy confidence. And he hasn't been hiding me. You guys just never ask the right questions. The table laughed, and I felt myself relax. Amanda had a gift for making people feel comfortable, without trying too hard, a quality I'd learned to appreciate after years of social situations that felt like performance art. We were 20 minutes into dinner when I saw her. Sarah entered with a man I didn't recognize. Not the preppy guy Tyler had mentioned seeing her with months earlier. This one was different. Older, maybe early 30s, with graying temples and the kind of calm confidence that came from being secure in who you were. He wore a simple black suit and seemed completely at ease. As Sarah introduced him to people, she looked good, really good, in a way that had nothing to do with the designer dress she wore or the professional way she'd styled her hair. There was something in her posture, in the way she carried herself, that suggested she'd found some kind of peace. That's her, isn't it? Amanda asked quietly. That's her. She's beautiful. I looked at Amanda, surprised by the generosity in her tone. You're not bothered by that? Why would I be? Beautiful women exist in the world. The question is whether you're bothered by it. I considered this as I watched Sarah laugh at something her date said. No, I'm not bothered. I'm actually glad she looks happy, and I was. Whatever resentment I'd carried had been replaced by something approaching indifference, seasoned with genuine hope that she'd figured out whatever she'd been searching for. The evening progressed without incident until the inevitable moment when Sarah spotted me across the room. Our eyes met briefly, and she gave a small nod of acknowledgement. I nodded back. It was civil, mature, and completely devoid of the drama I'd been dreading. During the speeches, while Mark was thanking everyone for celebrating with him and Emma, I found myself thinking about timing. How different choices at different moments could completely alter the trajectory of your life. If Sarah hadn't met Jessica, if I hadn't stood my ground during our final conversation, if either of us had been willing to compromise in different ways, we might have been sitting together at this wedding, perhaps even married ourselves, but we weren't, and for the first time, I felt truly grateful for that alternate reality remaining hypothetical. After the speeches, Amanda excused herself to find the restroom, and I stepped outside onto the hotel's terrace for some air. Portland's skyline sparkled in the distance, the same view I'd looked at from my apartment window countless times during the worst months of the breakup. Mind if I join you? I turned to find Sarah approaching, holding a glass of wine and looking somewhat nervous. Of course not. She stood beside me at the railing, and we looked out at the city in comfortable silence for a moment. You look well, she said finally. So do you. Really well, actually. Thank you. She paused. I heard you defended your thesis successfully. Congratulations. Thank you. I heard you changed jobs. Environmental work suits you. It does. It feels like I'm actually contributing something meaningful instead of just moving numbers around on spreadsheets. She took a sip of wine. I also heard you're seeing someone. I am, Amanda. She's wonderful. I'd like to meet her if that would be okay. Not tonight necessarily, but someday. When it's not weird. I studied Sarah's face, looking for hidden motives or manipulation, but found only sincere curiosity. I'd like that too, actually. I think you'd like her. What's she like? It was such a normal question, the kind friends ask about each other's partners, that it caught me off guard. She's a veterinarian, very practical, very grounded. She knows exactly who she is and what she wants, and she's not interested in being anyone else for anyone else's benefit." Sarah smiled, and there was something wistful in it. "That sounds perfect for you." "It is." "What about your guy?" "He seems nice, Robert. He teaches high school history and coaches soccer. We met at a volunteer event for the non-profit." She paused. "He's nothing like the men Jessica used to set me up with. I'm guessing that's a good thing. It's the best thing. He doesn't care about impressing anyone or being impressed. He just wants to build a good life with someone who shares his values." She looked at me directly. "Kind of like what you always wanted, actually. Sounds like you figured out what you actually wanted too." "It took me a while, but yes. I had to learn the difference between wanting a life that looks good and wanting a life that feels good." Amanda appeared in the doorway, scanning the terrace until she spotted me. I waved her over and she approached with the easy stride of someone who had nothing to worry about. "Amanda, I'd like you to meet Sarah," I said as she reached us. "Sarah, this is Amanda." The two women shook hands, and I held my breath for some undercurrent of tension or awkwardness. Instead, Sarah smiled warmly. "It's nice to meet you. I've heard wonderful things." "Likewise. Congratulations on your new career path. Environmental work is so important." They fell into easy conversation about conservation efforts and Portland's sustainability initiatives. And I realized I was watching something remarkable. Two women who had every reason to dislike each other, instead connecting over shared values and interests. "I should get back to Robert," Sarah said after a few minutes. "But Amanda, I hope we can talk more sometime. Maybe over coffee." "I'd like that." After Sarah left, Amanda and I remained on the terrace, watching the last of the sunset fade behind the city's silhouette. "Well, that wasn't what I expected," I said. "What did you expect?" "Drama, awkwardness, her trying to get me back, or you feeling threatened, or me realizing I'd made a mistake." Amanda laughed. "Instead, you got two adults having a normal conversation about their current relationships." "Pretty much." "Are you disappointed?" "I considered this seriously." "No, I'm relieved. For months, I built Sarah up in my mind as this complicated figure from my past. Seeing her tonight, talking to her normally, it made me realize she's just a person who made some mistakes and learned from them. Like everyone else. And how do you feel about that?" "Free, finally. Completely free from needing her to be anything other than someone I used to date who's hopefully found happiness with someone else." We returned to the reception and spent the rest of the evening dancing, laughing with old friends and celebrating Mark and Emma's beginning. As we prepared to leave, Sarah and Robert were saying their goodbyes near the exit. "It was good seeing you," Sarah said to me. "Really good. I'm happy for you." "I'm happy for you, too." We hugged briefly, a friendly embrace between two people who had once meant everything to each other, and now meant something different but equally valuable, proof that people could grow beyond their mistakes. On the drive home, Amanda was quiet until we hit the freeway. "Can I tell you something?" She said. "Always." Meeting Sarah tonight made me understand something about our relationship that I hadn't quite grasped before. "What's that?" "You chose me not because I was different from her, but because you knew who you were when you met me." The person who was with Sarah was still figuring himself out. The person who's with me knows exactly what he wants. She was right, though I hadn't articulated it that way before. And what do I want? The same thing I want. A partner, not a project. Someone to build a life with, not someone to save or be saved by. Someone who chooses you every day, not because you're the best option available, but because you're the right option for them. 6 months later, Amanda and I moved in together. Not because we were running from anything or toward some idealized version of success, but because we'd reached the natural next step in building something real together. The apartment we chose was smaller than the one Sarah and I had shared, but it felt infinitely larger because it was filled with intention rather than compromise. Every decision we made, from paint colors to furniture to where to hang pictures, reflected our shared vision of what home should feel like. Sarah sent a text when she got engaged to Robert 6 months after that. Just a simple message. Wanted you to hear it from me first. We're getting married next spring. I hope you and Amanda are as happy as we are. I showed Amanda the message and she smiled. Should we send a gift? I think we should. We did. A donation to the environmental non-profit where Sarah worked, made in their names. She sent a thank you note that was warm but not overly familiar. The perfect tone for people who had moved beyond their shared past into mutual respect. 2 years after that terrible night, when Sarah left a note on our kitchen counter, I was sitting in a different kitchen with a different woman, drinking properly brewed coffee and reading the Sunday crossword puzzle aloud while Amanda worked on her laptop at the table. 7 across, I said. Lesson learned the hard way. 9 letters. Amanda looked up from her screen. Education? Too many letters. Experience? Perfect. I filled in the letters. 10 down, moving forward positively. 8 letters. Progress, also perfect. She closed her laptop and came to sit beside me. We're good at this. Crosswords. Partnership. I set down the puzzle and kissed her. Yes, we are. Outside, Portland was waking up to another Sunday morning. Somewhere in the city, Sarah was probably sharing breakfast with Robert, building their own version of happiness. Jessica was likely posting carefully curated photos of whatever life she'd constructed for herself. Mark and Emma were settling into married life, and Tyler was probably nursing a hangover from whatever adventure he'd gotten into the night before. Everyone was writing their own story, making their own choices, living with their own consequences. And for the first time in years, I was genuinely happy with the story I was writing. Sarah had been right about one thing. She did deserve better than what we'd had together. But better wasn't what she'd thought it was when she left. Better was finding someone who shared her actual values, instead of someone who looked good on paper. Better was building something authentic instead of something impressive. I'd been right, too. She did get worse before she got better. But she got there without me, exactly as it should have been. And I got better, too. Not by proving I was worthy of someone who didn't appreciate what I offered, but by finding someone who did. The crossword puzzle lay completed between us, every answer in its proper place. Some had been easy. Others had required patience and multiple attempts, but in the end, everything fit together exactly as it was meant to, just like life. When you finally stop trying to force the wrong pieces into the wrong spaces. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.